Today's gospel follows the story in the gospel, which is very familiar to us, of the rich young man. He's the one who asks, what does he have to do to inherit eternal life? And he cites the fact that he's been keeping the commandments and doing his best. And after he recites all this, Jesus says, that's very good, but there's one more thing I want you to do, rich young man. I want you to give up your riches, give them all up and follow me. Well, we know the story tells us that at that point, the man gets very disappointed, so much so that he walks away. He thought so much of his possessions that he could not give them up even for Jesus. I remember some years ago on the television, there was a very fabulously wealthy man. He was a billionaire. He was being interviewed by one of the reporters. And the reporter said to him, when you die, what would you like written on your tombstone? And the billionaire looked at the reporter and he said to him, nothing. And he said, nothing? He said, nothing, because I don't think I'm going to die. Well, the reporter thought he was joking around and said, no, seriously, tell me. And the man said, no, I'm very serious. I do not think I'm going to die. Well, a couple of years ago, I remember reading in the newspaper and on the news that this billionaire did die. But for some reason or another, because of everything he had this idea that he was going to live forever. In today's gospel, Jesus is not against having money or being successful. We can't interpret it that way. But he does warn about the danger of riches, what riches can do to us relative to our attitude in life. And what are some of these dangers that perhaps Jesus is warning us about? Well, first of all, riches can sometimes give us a false sense of independence. We think we don't need anyone. We think we can buy anything we want or anyone. And the worst of all this is we think we don't even need God. And sometimes that can then lead to an actual denial of God. So these are some of the dangers Jesus is speaking of. Another is that riches and material things can tie us too much to the earth. If all our interests are here, we tend to forget the hereafter. Everything we concentrate on, everything that's important, the values we have, are all based upon, our ability to be here on earth. And there's nothing wrong with being here on earth, obviously, but we have to be careful that the riches of today make us forget about the hereafter of tomorrow. Then also, riches can often make us very selfish. The more we have, the more we want. Many of us have seen this with people, perhaps certain celebrities or people we read about in the news. They're always after more. No matter how much they have, they want more. They're never satisfied. It's something like drinking salt water. The more we drink, the thirstier we get. So life becomes all about, for people who focus totally on their riches, becomes all about retaining what they have. And also, a fact is that, from some of the statistics that we've seen, that some of the richest people are the least charitable. They just can't let go of it. This is what Jesus is speaking about when he talks about the dangers of riches. So does this mean that riches make us hopeless in attaining salvation? Well, of course not. There's nothing wrong with being successful. There's nothing wrong with saving some money for a rainy day. It's not a statement that Jesus is saying it's impossible, because remember, he tells us that with God, all things are possible. What it is this question of, where material things stand in our lives. For all of us, and particularly the rich, putting God first ensures that we are not tied to the things of the earth, that we don't become selfish, and that we don't have the false idea that we are totally independent. Jesus warns us about these things in the gospel. Again, the rich young man whose story we heard about prior to the gospel we hear today, he just couldn't give up what he had. He couldn't give up the attitude that he had. He couldn't give up, how much his material things meant to him, even to the point of not following Jesus. So, after all, we have to keep in mind that unlike that man who was interviewed some years ago on the television, all of us are realistic. We know that we're going to die, no matter who we are. And after all, in death, all things become equal. Doesn't matter how much we have or how much we may have had. And all the riches in the world ultimately cannot hold off, as the psalm says, the grasp of the grave. So let us not look askance at riches and at things that perhaps make life a little easier, but let us always put them into perspective. Let us know what is important, but also let us know what is not important, particularly the riches in our lives.